All right. I'm gonna get started. Okay. I figured we could like sit for the thing if you don't want to come up here right away. Yeah. We're just gonna start with a little intro and then you can sit here or come up. Katie will introduce you. Whatever you want. It might be bright in the light.
Oh yeah, it might be easier just to like. It might just be easier to like have you guys sit like in the audience and next to like after, and then these will be like.
All right, so we're going to get started. Today we're presenting Blueprints for Green Teams, a prescription for a better tomorrow. This talk is sponsored by the Climate Change and Health Interest Group. And my name is Alyssa, this is Katie, and then we'll introduce the rest of our panelists after. So the learning objectives for today are to describe how climate change is related to emergency medicine, to describe climate action initiatives attainable in the ED, to create a toolkit for developing an EM green team, and then hopefully all of you will go to your own institutions and tackle some climate initiatives in your own departments. So we'll start with like a brief background, and then we'll transition to our panelist discussion. We don't have any disclosures. All right, so almost every time that we look at the news, we see another climate disaster. Humans are contributing to climate change by burning fossil fuels. With a warming climate, we see extreme heat, worsening flooding or droughts, and more extreme weather. And this image shows the flooding of the Cincinnati River just a month ago after some heavy rainfall. A few states away, we see wildfires burning in the Carolinas. Events like these lead to numerous health effects and increased demand for emergency services, and there can also be disruptions in the supply chain. As healthcare systems and EDs, as we try to help, we actually are just adding to the problem. So every single ED visit contributes to approximately 34 pounds of waste per patient per day, and this equates to 6 million tons of waste annually. So as a visual, 6 million tons of waste is the weight of 100,000 elephants, a pile equivalent to 200,000 large dumpsters, the weight of 1.5 billion garbage bags, or a pile as big as a 60-story football field. So the United States healthcare sector emits more carbon emissions than any other country in the world, and we are responsible for approximately 27% of the global healthcare carbon footprint. 8.5% of all carbon emissions in the US come from the healthcare sector.
All right. Well, researchers have studied how we can work to achieve net zero emissions in the healthcare sector. So this chart shows basically a visual of that. Scope 1 is focusing on directed emissions, so ensuring our facilities, vehicles, anesthetics are sustainable. Scope 2 is focusing on indirect emissions, so things like electricity. And then scope 3 encompasses pretty much everything else, so like food, medical devices, medicines, and like transportation. In the ED, we're not always able to target scope 1 or 2, but we can work on making strides to tackle scope 3. So how do we do this? The first step is creating a green team. So Practice Green Health actually published these guidelines for creating an effective green team. And basically it involves these 10 things. One is establishing leadership advocacy, creating a multidisciplinary team. So like nurses, residents, attendings, environmental services, clerks, like literally anybody in the department, creating a team mission, and then performing a needs assessment, which is basically a way to identify gaps and then like figuring out what is lacking and then how we can fill that gap. Conducting dynamic and productive meetings, prioritizing and maintaining momentum, monitoring and creating measurable goals, communicating, educating, celebrating your accomplishments, evaluating your team's effectiveness in being ready to tackle barriers and challenges. So once your green team is developed, there are many tangible sustainability initiatives that can be um, tackled in the ED. So this is actually an article that was written by a lot of EM and climate health experts called the Climate Smart ED, a primer. Um, they basically focus on waste reduction in the ED. And from an ED perspective, they recommend performing a waste audit, educating staff on waste segregation, setting printers to print double-sided, reducing red bag waste, and then they provide a list of actionable items to tackle these things at an institutional and individual level. And then besides waste, there are a lot of other categories that they also highlighted as well. All right, so now that we have some background information, we're gonna go over a panelist discussion. So our panelists are those who have real life experience creating and leading their own green teams at their own institutions. So first, we'll introduce Dr. Davis and Dr. Valentine. They're from the University of Michigan. They lead their EM Green team at Michigan Medicine. And then Dr. Strelo and Dr. Marvel are from Stanford University, and they lead their green team at their university. And then we'll start off with some basic questions, and then we'll move into more of like an audience discussion. So think of some questions, and we'll hopefully get to them.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Oh, I think, oh, I was gonna say,
You can hear it all the way in the back. That'd be on this panel, right?
do you guys have a microphone?
Thank you.
Oh. Okay, so the first question is, how did you organize your ED green teams? So whoever just wants to jump in.
So at the University of Michigan, we kind of happened at the right time. We had a discussion with our medical school actually was trying to reinvigorate this idea of climate change and sustainability among the different departments. And so there was a call to have someone join the medical school team. And then it was kind of floated about like, hey, is anyone interested in creating a team among the emergency department? And so as a faculty, I was actually a fellow then, I was able to kind of lead the charge in creating the green team. And then at the same time, we had two very interested medical, or not medical students, residents, Katie and Alyssa, who were really excited about this idea and getting involved and engaged. And so we were able to create a multidisciplinary team within our department, within the adult and children's emergency department, really focused on trying to gain as much support as possible. I feel strongly that it needs to be a team, not just of physicians, because there are a number of ideas that we have that if we put into place, a number of the different job families in the ED can't actually implement. There's a lot of things that we don't do that I have no idea about, and I don't know the process. And so we're fortunate to have nurses, clerks, register people that go around from room to room, EVS. We have a number of different people on the team, so they can all provide their perspective of the different flows and processes that we see in the ED every day. And then they're also able to come up with solutions and new ideas of things that we really couldn't do on our own. So it's been kind of organic as it's evolved, and we've had more people involved and join the team. And then we've been able to partner really closely with we actually have a chief sustainability officer of Michigan Medicine. And they're working on their own institutional initiatives that we're able to partner with and now start to roll out. So we're working on medical plastics recycling. We're rolling it out in the children's ED because it's just a smaller footprint. And then before we roll it over to the adult ED. And I think that we have a very supportive chair who's in the audience, and by having like a lot of support from the top really helps move some of these things as well. And made us be able to be more successful.
Yeah, we had sort of a similar organic approach. Dr. Marvel from Stanford faculty in the emergency department, I was, passionate about climate change, was getting more into that field, was alarmed by some of the numbers we saw during that intro presentation on how much greenhouse gas is actually emitted by the healthcare sector. And we were kind of in a fortunate position. There was actually already 2 other departments that had formalized green teams in the institution, the orthopedics department and anesthesia, which had already done amazing work in reducing their anesthetic gas emissions. So sort of modeling off their approaches, I helped start an ED Green Team, and I cannot pretend that it was a solo effort. We were fortunate to have a lot of support from the institution. Similarly, we have a chief sustainability officer, and that role has grown over the years. And we had a nurse manager who's very passionate about this as well, and she does a lot of work with our supply chain and ordering. And that, I think, just highlights the importance, as you mentioned, of collaboration. It shouldn't be only a physician-led organization, so it's sort of started with myself and one of our nurse managers, and we made an effort to involve as many different facets of the emergency department as possible. Techs, nurses, residents. It's just amazing. One of our initiatives started with something that tech recognized, and I had no idea that these, like the pulse ox is what they did after they got tossed when they stripped the patient's rooms. And the techs are the ones often turning the rooms over in between patients. So it was this tech that was able to bring the idea of, hey, can we do something different with these pulse oximeters? And it turns out there was a recycling program. So it was almost like a tech-led initiative based on something they recognized that I personally would have. So it's been cool to have a collaborative approach and just get a lot of different perspectives.
All right, so our next question is what are some sustainability initiatives that your ED has been working on? And I know you guys already kind of touched on this, but if you could elaborate on anything else that you're working on right now.
I can touch on one we did a couple years ago, and it highlights both sort of the success and failure. One of the challenges, I think, of running like a sustainability operation in the department is recognizing how much paper waste was generated by the after visit summaries. Double-sided, a sticking point for everybody. So we actually rolled out a pretty successful program to offer patients an electronic version. They all have a My Health app through Stanford that they can see their records on, too much of their records on sometimes, but then they also had the ability to get the same instructions they get in paper form on that. And there was a big nursing education push, and for a time there was a huge drop off in the number of ABSs after visit summaries that we were actually printing out. So it was what I consider a real win. But then a challenge with a lot of these things is like, creating a sustainable culture of sustainability, like continuing to push these things forward. And that almost involves like a culture change aspect too, which has been, it's a bigger needle to move. So there's, a decent amount of nursing turnover. We have new travelers coming in now. A couple of years later, when there hasn't been like constant pushes to keep this at the forefront, hardly, I know a few nurses that were originally involved in the program will still offer the electronic version, but most have gone fully back to print form. So that's something I want to revisit very soon, to see if we can light a fire under that. But yeah, it was a win for a while, but highlighted one of the challenges we've had is just keeping these initiatives sustainable and ongoing. It involves sort of culture shifts and new practices, thinking about things different ways. So how to maintain these initiatives is almost a bigger challenge than starting them.
So it's hard to sustain your sustainability. I like that.
I think that was a tagline for a second. Let's make
Yeah.
sustainability sustainable.
I think that anything that's behavioral based is always challenging, right? And it doesn't mean it can't be done. It's just you have to account for backsliding, you have to account for turnover and things. Another thing that we've done, which the health systems, I don't know about your health systems, rightfully they focus on, most of them are focusing on anesthesia and the OR and the IR. And I think that's very reasonable. They produce a huge amount of plastic and a huge amount of the greenhouse gas emissions. And so it's always better to try to swim downstream than upstream. And so one of the things that we heard about a few years ago was, that they were talking about like why they were using so much nitrous. So I'm sure many of you know that nitrous contributes an enormous amount of your greenhouse gas emissions from your health system. And anesthetic gases as a whole do, but nitrous actually does dramatically of those. It's by far the most. And it's all from leakage. 99%, somewhere between 95 and 99% never goes into the patient. It just is it leaks through the system at most places where it's centrally pumped. and it's impossible to stop the leaks. So leaking is, impossible to stop, and it's really bad, and it's contributing way more than probably the rest of the emergency department combined. And we had pumped nitrous centrally to our emergency department, and they had decided that we needed it. We needed it so much that we couldn't stop doing that. And luckily, they did do this tank study, and we figured out how many tanks we'd have to move around for both the anesthesiologists, but also the emergency department. And it turns out it's super easy to just tank it. It's cheaper, or it's hardly anymore. It's about the same because you only have to replace the tanks in the ORs like once a month. And we just don't need it in the emergency department at all. So when there was like well, we don't know if we can tank it down to the ED, we're like, fine, just get rid of it. And if our doctors complain, we'll talk to them, and they can just use ketamine. So it's just another good reason to use ketamine. Everybody should get ketamine. And so we don't use nitrous anymore in our emergency department. And in fact, the whole health system is pretty much has cut that out, except for tanked in the ORs.
Yeah, so we've been working on a couple different things. This year, we did a trash audit, and our big thing was just getting recycling bins physically in the emergency department. We had them outside the department in the hallways, but not everyone would use them, understandably, because it was like that extra step. So we now have recycling bins in the department, which is great. We were able to switch all of our printers to double-sided, so cutting back a little bit on the discharge papers, but we have a work group on that. We also started a donation program. So if there's open supplies like parts of kits and stuff that you can't reuse, we donate it to the Humane Society. So we have a box in the emergency department where we can place those items. And then we're launching this new medical recycling program.
Yeah, that we try and appeal to people's love of animals. So there's like puppies and kitties all over the box, so then they'll donate items and then they'll all go to the Humane Society, any open, unused items. And from the visual waste audit, we're gonna be rolling out having actual recycling bins, but then also the medical plastics recycling, and that actually has already diverted about 18,000 pounds of waste from just the ORs since August. So we're hoping that that'll be pretty successful. There's a lot of things that can be recycled plastics wise that you wouldn't realize. It just has to be clean and not really contaminated. So like some of our MS's basins, if they're rinsed out and like fairly dry, you can recycle that. Things like that can all go into this. Any like saline bags that have like it can't have fluid, but like saline bags, the outside, then you have to rip them out of the bag. Those all can be recycled, things like that. So we're hoping to divert a lot of that waste. I think, like you said, behavioral changes. The EBS has been, or the after visit summary, the ABS has been a huge problem for us. Like we have people that have been in their positions for 10, 20 years, and they're like, no, we looked at this like 20 years ago, and we can't get rid of the papers. And you're like, I get it, but like people want to get rid of the papers now, and there's so many little systems issues that you have to talk to them. So like this work group is now being developed again when they've already had a work group 10 years ago, but now it's being revisited so that we can really try and find the different ways, like what are the systems that we could put in place, like have someone consistently ask, can you access the portal, instead of it relying on the behavior of someone who's new or not there or not consistent, trying to integrate into our system so that we can be more successful and really get buy-in, because there's some people that are so resistant to it. They're like, everyone needs 15 pages from their visit that they leave in the room. And so it's been a challenge, and we've been working on it for like, what, 3 years? Yeah, 3 years now, and we're still meeting a lot of resistance, but we're trying to get the papers out. But it's,
Yeah, I feel like phone use has changed the last 10 years. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of a crisis, right? So you think that we could argue that maybe times have changed?
can access the iPhone, yeah.
That's right, yeah, exactly. 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
The same as today.
So I
So-
think,
I was just gonna say, I think there's a lot of initiatives, like we have a number of other ones, like a restocking initiative that has been nursing led, where anything, you bring stuff out and then you don't use it, as long as we don't spill blood all over it, they'll actually restock it and put it in these blue bins, things like that. So it's more than we could probably do in 2 minutes. Do you wanna?
Yeah, I think just for sake of time, we'll skip this next question because I feel like we did talk a lot about challenges already. I guess one question I was hoping to go over is, what is your greatest piece of advice for creating a green team?
I'd say two things. One, well, three. Collaboration, as Will kind of alluded to, so find as many parties in your department as possible that would be interested in really trying to build a team so you get that variety of perspectives. Two, no project is too small. It's been almost an overwhelming part and a challenge in a way, in that literally everywhere you look, there's an opportunity to cut emissions. Plastic sleeves on the IV bags, switching to double-sided printing. So just even starting with one truly circumscribed project and showing some success is a good place to start. And then potentially look for unlikely places. If you don't even have a formalized green team, find out who in your department is in charge of ordering the supplies or who's on the supply and equipment task force. I recently positioned myself as a physician liaison on our nursing-led supply and equipment task force, so I could have a voice in that, because so much of, we saw so much of scope 3 emissions. Even if you don't have a formalized green team, there can still be a role to impact some of these scope 3 emissions just through meeting with your person that's in charge of ordering supplies.
I agree with all those things. I think that there are a lot of low-hanging fruit opportunities that if you're able to demonstrate that there's buy-in, there's people that are excited about these things, then you, I think, can go to your leadership too and show that there's support and that this is something that people can really kind of sink their teeth in and get involved in. And there's support from everyone in the department, and that can really help bolster kind of your team. And then interestingly enough, I've gone through like looking at the prices for like emesis basins, compostable emesis basins, and they're like a lot of the alternative options are actually the same price. So a lot of times you hear like cost is really the prohibitive factor to have to order some of these things. And when you look at them, a lot of them are the same price, at least from our like manual or whatever the thing is called that they order from. And so that has been helpful too, to say like, actually, like, no, this may save money, or this is actually the same price, can we do this, and this will, I think, be more sustainable for the emergency department.
C-suite sees usually a different type of green than we do, so if you can demonstrate that it's also cost savings, which a lot of these are, then that can help in traction as well.
I would say, let me try to add something different. I would say, looking outside of your like immediate surroundings, whether that's the emergency department or actually your health system. So two quick examples. I went to some talk and I met a new postdoc PhD student in like nutrition, and they had done all this work, some of it in Michigan actually, but they had no connection to the health system. But they knew everything on how to design food and dietary that was very green focused for systems. And so I just did introductions with them, and now they're working with the dietary people and the leadership at the health system level to do an entire analysis and reduction of our dietary stuff. And so it's just really recruiting resources and expertise beyond our four walls. Same with the pulmonary group. We didn't seem to think that we ever prescribed inhalers, right? Is another group that was like, no, we do. You should like include us. And I think that that's like building a big coalition is probably my recommendation.
All right, so I think we have time for a few questions if there are any from the audience.
Hi, Larry Bellinger from New York Presbyterian. What about circularity? In a circular economic model, the outputs from one system become the inputs for the next. Used to have a much more circular world, and now we're all in on waste. I guess an example here would be going back to autoclave glass syringes and needles as opposed to single-use one-off things. Any of you have any experience with a more circular approach, or heard any discussions about it?
To speak to the idea, so when I started as a resident to now as faculty, we used to autoclave most of our, like, this is a specific example, we used to autoclave most of the like laceration equipment, all of the direct regiscope equipment, and now we've gone to where we're much more, everything's single use because it's cheaper. And so you're in our current climate, you are, I guess, you are dealing with really what it comes down to is the bottom line. Is the way that it has to be discussed, is what is the bottom line. Like, all of these things are important to us, like to me outside of the bottom line, but to most people that I'm talking to, it's is the bottom line. So how can I show that this is actually worthwhile? And so unfortunately, it's had to be more discussions of like, well, instead of buying a laceration kit full of all these items that people are gonna throw away and only use one of the items, can we actually just not have this big kit in the lap cart? And can you just have people pick the items that they want, if it's gonna be that much more to autoclave reusable items? And so it's kind of tedious to have to go through and look at these systems and look at these different processes, but what it's coming down to now is the bottom line. And so that we can say that it can be more sustainable financially and then also for the environment and our patients by looking at these things more individually to see how we can make them more, unfortunately, they're less circuitous, but they're more like, they're not reusable items, but it's how can we kind of like at least divert some of those things and not throw them all in the landfill.
That's a big thing, Just a quick suggestion, have you looked at hard stops in EM that could prevent folks from, say, printing? To me, the paper, consumption is very, something that we can, reduce. So there's a hard stop at discharge that where a mandatory print it up, So something like that can avoid this whole issue of misconduct.
Yeah.
That's, I think, on the horizon for us. We haven't done too much with that, but we do have a collaborator who's, his interest is in sort of medical informatics and how we can make EMR more sustainable. One thing would be like having little pop-ups on how much it costs the drugs are like, do you consider this alternative? There's I think a lot of space to integrate this in the EMR, which I think is good.
I think that's true for some of these ordering practices, there's big ordering practices.
Just the plastic recycling to get at it more resources, is it downcycling, or is the plastics, that's recycled, do you get the same grade back?
Sorry, what was the last one?
So in terms of the plastics that are being
Yeah.
recycled, are they being downgraded to being made into archives, which is better than landfills,
Yeah.
right? But, or are they coming back, the same quality?
No, they're not coming back at the same quality.
Okay.
Not for the medical plastics, but for other things like the pulse oximeter. When we're doing that, those are actually being remade into pulse oximeters and being brought back into the
Okay.
So there's certain things, but this is medical plastics recycling.
Is the downgrade, not the landfill? Got it, okay, thanks.
Katie, can I steal one more question?
Yes, one more.
So me and Brown are considering offsetting our carbon emissions as a group. We are not actively doing it, so don't get any ideas. But I wanted to ask if any of your groups have had any discussions about calculating the potential carbon footprint of your faculty, particularly by coming to conferences like this, and considering offsets. So what we're considering doing in the group, again, not doing very early, is potentially donating to community organizations. So we have a regional tree planting organization where we can easily determine the impact of their work in the community. It's almost similar to insetting. So insetting is investing in your healthcare system itself to reduce some of the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. But I was curious, and I can talk about this more at our interest group meeting, but I want to get ideas if anyone has them.
I don't think we are doing that, but I do think that you've heard all these pushes, like we need to have these in-person meetings, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to have conferences back together. And I think one of the arguments that I've made to our chair, to some of the leadership, is like, no, we don't. Because these mean that people are driving in and transportation is a huge problem, right? And so let's actually reduce that as much as possible, and let's organize our in-person events so that they're very coordinated, so it's once a quarter and things like that. So, we're not offsetting, but we are definitely pushing back on some of the things that are big contributors, especially around transportation.
Can I comment on that too? So from a system level point of view, just staff to and from work is one of the biggest contributors in scope 3. And so Providence, for example, is organizing can you carpool to work with people? They're setting up carpools. They're setting up incentives for people who bike to work. So within the hospital system itself, they're putting these incentives to help their staff decrease their own carbon emissions. Also, I would put a plug in for tree maintenance, not tree planting, because there's too much money for tree planting and not enough for taking care of the trees that already exist.
This group does both of them.
All right. Well, thank you so much to our panelists. If we could give them a round of applause, and then we'll move on to our next presentation.
And for more discussions, please join our meeting tomorrow at 3.